We're on DAF Mem Tes Samad Aleph. And we were talking yesterday about a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. And the machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim is as follows. Got to get one thing. So you have three chutzers. You have the east chutzer, the middle chutzer, and you have the west chutzer. The east made an eruv with the middle, the west made an eruv with the middle, but the east and the west did not make an eruv with each other. Reb Shimon says it's permissible for there to be movement from the west chutzer to the middle and from the east chutzer to the middle, but not from the east all the way to the west. And the Chachamim say, no, there can be no movement at all until all three chutzers make an eruv with each other. What we had seen yesterday is a shita of Shmuel. Shmuel wants to clarify Reb Shimon, and he says, don't think that Reb Shimon was so lenient to allow, in that scenario, movement not only from the outer chutzers to the inner chutzers, but even movement of objects from the inner chutzer to the outer chutzers. No. He only allows movement of objects from the outer chutzers into the inner chutzer, but does not allow movement of objects in the inner chutzer to either outer chutzer. Why is that? Because since objects in the inner chutzer have made an eruv in either mutually exclusive chutzer, they're sort of in a tug of war that precludes them from going to either direction. That's what Shmuel had clarified in Reb Shimon.
But once it goes into the middle chutzer from one of the outer ones, can that item go back out?
It can go back out.
So it doesn't
yes.
change its status.
It doesn't change its status, whatever it was at the inception of Shabbos. Now, Tanya Kavase, second line in the Gemara. Tanya Kavase de Rav Yehuda liba de Shmuel. We have a brisa to support the shita of Shmuel, who says that even Rav Shimon is limiting objects in the inner chutzer. Amar Rav Shimon lamaha davar doime. This case of where you had the three people in our Mishnah encamped side by side, which is really how we got started on this whole story, is analogous to three courtyards which open up to each other and open up to Rishus Harabim. Irvu shtayim im ha'imtzayis, zu mevia mitoch beisa v'ocheles, v'zu mevia mitoch beisa v'ocheles. That if the two outer chutzers, east and west, made an eruv with the middle chutzer, so then objects that are in each outer chutzer can be brought into the middle chutzer and they can have their meal there. And zu mechazeres mosara l'soch beisa, v'zu mechazeres mosara l'soch beisa. And when they finish their meal, like Alan's question was, they can bring the food back into the outer chutzer. But you notice in this brisa, nowhere does it talk about objects or food that started in the middle chutzer. It only talks about objects that started in the outer chutzers can be brought into the middle chutzer. So that's the support for what Shmuel is suggesting, that Reb Shimon is only lenient when it comes to objects in the outer chutzers coming into the middle chutzer, but not objects in the middle chutzer going to the outer chutzers.
And the people inside the middle share the food they brought from...
Presumably so, sure. Aval chachamim omrim, but the chachamim say, shloshton asuros, that all three are usher because the outer ones did not make an eruv with each other. Ve'az the Shmuel, the Taimei Shmuel is consistent. The Amar Shmuel, Chatzer shebein shnei mavuos. You have a slightly different case over here, so just sort of expand your illustration in your mind. Instead of three adjacent chatzers, you have three chatzers which are divided by two mavuos, divided by two alleyways. Okay, so all you need to do is, instead of having in your mind three courtyards, right, you have three courtyards, but there's a gap between each courtyard because there's an alleyway that runs through. Now the alleyway, in order for you to be permitted to carry in an alleyway, you need to do an eruv. You need to bake an eruv with all the people who want to use that alleyway in order to be allowed to carry in the alleyway. Correct? This is basic eruvim, yes? So let's just talk about that case. Chatzer shebein shnei mavuos. If you have an inner chutzer, the middle chutzer that's between two alleyways, and on the other side of each alleyway is another chutzer. That's the implicit information that we need. So irva im sheneihem, asura im sheneihem. So if the middle chutzer makes an eruv with the two outer chutzers that are beyond the respective mavoi, so asura im shneihem. So it's usher together with the both of them. So what does this mean? Irvim shneim asura im shneihem. All right, and this is because the halacha is that the people in the inner chatzer are not allowed to bring their items into the outer mavois. They cannot, because since the two outer chatzers did not make an eruv with each other, the people in the inner chatzer are not allowed to bring their food out into those mavuos, into those mavois. That's the principle that Shmuel is saying. They're not allowed to bring their mavoi. They're not allowed to bring their objects into either mavoi.
There's no purpose in making that error.
Really, well, the purpose would be for only the outer people in the outer chutzner. The people in the outer chutzers can bring their items into the mavoi because they're okay, because they're sharing it only with the people in the inner chutzner. However, lo irva im sheneihem, but if the people in the middle chutzner did not make an eruv with both of them, oseres al sheneihem, then they will aser al sheneihem. Then, since they did not make an eruv, not only are the people in the inner chutzner not permitted to take their objects into either mavoi, but also they prohibit the members of the outer chutzers from bringing their items into the mavoi as well. That's the difference between Oseris im Sheneihem or Oseris al Sheneihem.
Isn't that obvious? They didn't make an error with them.
Right, but that's the point. We're using it just for contrast. The first case was where the people in either outer chutzner can bring their items into the mavoi, even though the people in the inner chutzner cannot bring their items out into the mavoi. The second case is where no eruv was made with the people in the inner chutzner, and therefore, since the people in the inner chutzner use the two mavois, so if I'm a resident of the outer chutzner, even if all the members of the outer chutzner made an eruv, but since we share it with people on the inner chutzner and we didn't make an eruv with them, we can't carry into the mavoi. Now, ha'isa be'echad regila u'be'echad eina regila, zeh she'regila bo aser v'zeh she'eina regila bo mutar. So here's the next case. Okay, you've got east chutzner, then mavoi, then middle chutzner, then mavoi, then west chutzner. Now let's say that the people in the middle chutzner usually use only the eastern mavoi. They don't usually use the west. Maybe like the entranceway to the western mavoi is a little bit narrow, it's hard to access it, so they don't normally use, or it's inconvenient for some other reason, they normally don't use the western mavoi. They normally, almost all the time, use the eastern mavoi. So in that situation, what we do is that we say that as long as the people in the western chutzner made their own eruv, we give them the whole mavoi. And we say, fine. So we don't look at it as if the people of the middle chutzner have any kind of claim to stake in the western mavoi. And therefore, the western mavoi, the people of the western chutzner are allowed to carry in the western mavoi. And the only mavoi that we prohibit is the eastern mavoi, because even though the people in the eastern chutzner made an eruv for themselves, but since they share that mavoi with people in the middle chutzner, and they didn't make an eruv with them, they're not allowed to carry in that mavoi.
Does this declaration, by the way, do these declarations have to be made every eruv Shabbos?
There's no declaration. Who said anything about a declaration? This is just a statement of fact in halacha, that because the people in the middle mavoi normally, most of the time, use the eastern mavoi, not the western mavoi, so it's not that we declare anything, but the halacha is that the western mavoi is the exclusive purview for these halachas of the people of the western chutzner. Okay? Okay. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, irva im she'ena regila bo, huta regila la'atzma. Now, if, however, let's say in that same case where the people normally use the eastern mavoi, but before Shabbos they did something out of character, and the people in the middle mavoi made an eruv with the people in the western chutzner. So this demonstrates that they want to use the western mavoi, and they didn't make an eruv with the people in the eastern chutzner. So in that situation, we then say that because they've demonstrated that they want to be partners with the guys in the western chutzner, we give the Eastern Mavoi exclusively to the people in the Eastern Chatzar, and therefore the people in the East Chatzar can carry into it.
This Shabbos they're changing their
Because
mind.
this Shabbos they've changed over, they've switched over to the Western Mavoi. Okay?
How do they demonstrate that change?
By making the Eruv.
For the Western.
By making the Eruv with the guys in the Western Chatzar, they've demonstrated that they plan to use the Western Mavoi.
And how did they, what do you mean that the word demonstrate? What did they do?
They made an Eruv. How do you make an Eruv? They all contributed food,
Oh, I see.
right? All the members of the middle Chatzar contributed each one a piece of matzah. All the members of the Western Chatzar contributed a piece of matzah. And now they have a container with a dozen pieces of matzah, and that shows, okay? All right. Va'amar Rabba bar Rav Huna Amar Shmuel Im irva regila la'atzmo v'zeh she'ena regila bo lo irev. Let's talk about the next case. The Eastern Chatzar made its own eruv without incorporating with the middle Chatzar. V'zeh she'ena regila bo lo irev. The people in the Western Chatzar didn't even make an eruv for themselves. So forget about the middle Chatzar. The people in the Western Chatzar didn't even make an eruv among themselves. Vihi atzma lo irva, and the middle Chatzar also did not make an eruv even among themselves. Dochen osa eitzel she'en regila bo. So the halacha is that even though the people in the middle Chatzar normally use the Eastern Mavoi, but since by giving them rights in the Eastern Mavoi, we would be depriving the Eastern Chatzar people from carrying in the Mavoi, we accommodate the people of the Eastern Chatzar by pushing the people in the middle Chatzar over to the Western Chatzar, to the Western Mavoi, even though they normally don't use the Western Mavoi. And the reason why we do this is uchagon zeh kofen al midas sedom. The principle of midas sedom is if it's no skin off of your nose, right? If you don't lose zeh nena v'zeh chaser, if one person benefits and you don't lose anything by it, let's accommodate the person who benefits when you don't lose anything. So since in the case of that we just described, the people of the West are not going to be able to carry into the Mavi no matter what, whether or not the people of the middle Chatzar are part of that Mavi or not, because they didn't make their own eruv. So therefore we're going to consign the people in the middle Chatzar to the Western Mavoi to enable the people of the Eastern Chatzar to be able to carry in the Eastern Mavoi. You got it? Okay, great. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hamakbid al eruvo ein eruvo eruv. Mashamo eruv shemo. This is a general halacha. Now, the whole concept of an eruv is to make an incorporated entity so that we're considered to be one singular entity in a shared space, and that enables us to carry in a space, because the only time that you're allowed to carry inside a chutzner is if it's singularly owned. So when you incorporate by sharing food, you create a singular entity and a corporation. All right? That's the principle we've been talking about all along. Every person in the chutzner gives over a piece of matzah. We put it in a container, put it in a box, and that's our incorporated entity. Okay? Now, what happens if one person says, I'm giving you that piece of matzah, but I don't want anyone to eat that. That's my matzah. Don't anyone touch that matzah. You see that matzah that's got a little corner, that's a little bent? That's my matzah. I better come back. When I come back here after Shabbos, I better see that matzah intact. I know, Yankel, you like to eat a lot. Don't touch that matzah. So if a guy says that, then it's not an eruv. The eruv is not kosher. Because the whole point of an eruv is that we all share everything together. We no longer retain singular rights on any particular item in that eruv. It's called a mixture. That's the word eruv. And Rabbi Chanina Amar eruvo eruv ela shenikra me anshe vardina. And Rabbi Chanina argues, he says, if a guy is selfish like that and he says, that's my matzah, it's still a kosher eruv, but we call him a man from Vardina, which is that's a big insult, because the people of Vardina were very miserly, stingy. They didn't want to share anything. Vardina sounds like it's somewhere in Italy, from Sicily or something.
They fell stone again.
Right.
If the Eruv is valid, is he still allowed to be a participant in the Eruv?
So according to Rabbi Chanina, yes. According to Rabbi Chanina, it's a totally kosher eruv, and he's not a nice guy. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, hacholok es eruvo eno eruv, So Shmuel says another halacha. He says if you collect all the matzahs, and then the guy who's collected all the matzahs then goes ahead and splits half the matzahs in one box and half the matzahs in another box, that's also not an eruv. Why? Because so the Gemara says Kaman ke Beis Shammai. So who's he going like? Is he going like Beis Shammai? He's asking us a question. The Tanya. Chamisha shagavu es eruven benasnu b'shnei kelim Beis Shammai omrim ein ze eruv uBeis Hillel omrim harei ze eruv. We saw this yesterday. That the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is Beis Shammai say that if you collect all of the food and you put some of the food in one container, some of the food in another container, that's not an eruv. But Beis Hillel says it is an eruv. So are you telling me that Shmuel subscribes to Beis Shammai? That can't be, because we always go like Beis Hillel. So afilu tema Beis Hillel adkan lo kamri Beis Hillel hasam ela demalian lamana va'aiser aval hecha depalgi miflag lo. So he says no. Even Beis Hillel would agree that if after you've collected all the matzahs and put them in one box, if afterwards you divide them and split them up, then you're demonstrating that you don't want it to be a collected, unified entity. The case that Beis Hillel was addressing over there is where you took a whole bunch of matzahs and you couldn't fit them into one box, and so you had some spillover, so you had to put it in a second container. But here, when everything can be in one container and you deliberately, the DAF could go ahead and split it up, even Beis Hillel would agree that that's not an eruv. Now the Gemara asks, V'tarti lamali. So why does Shmuel have to make both statements? First he makes the statement of a guy who says, that's my matzah, that's not an eruv. And then he says, if you split it up, that's also not an eruv. Both of them are descriptive of situations where it's a mixture that's not a mixture. So why did he have to make both statements? So I'll tell you why. Tzrichi. That because if you only had the first case, maybe only there is Shmuel machmir, because there a guy says, that's my matzah and I don't want to share it. But over here, everyone's willing to share their matzah. They just, for whatever reason, decide to divide them up spatially. Maybe that's not a problem. And and conversely, if I only had the second sock of Shmuel that he's machmir when you physically divide them up, maybe it's only because they're physically, spatially apart from each other that it's not an eruv. But if they're all in the same container, maybe Shmuel would agree that it is an eruv, despite the fact that one guy is miserly, and therefore you need to tell me both halachas. Amar le Rabbi Abba le Rav Yehuda bevei ma'atzar to devei Rav Zakkai. So Rav Abba says to Rav Yehuda in the olive press of Rav Zakkai. Someone told me today, I just questioned out loud, why does the Gemara have to tell me that it was in the olive press of Rav Zakkai? And he told me, he was reading in a footnote from the Hebrew art scroll, that it says over there, that's to tell you that even when these rabbis are outside the base medrash, and they're doing their job, they're still speaking and learning. Even though they may be doing something very mundane, they're still speaking and learning. And something for us to remember, that if you're taking a spatzir, or if you're jogging, you're exercising, or you're just at work and you happen to be with a coworker at the water cooler, you should still be speaking and learning. Okay? So he says, Umi Omar Shmuel hacholok es eruv o eno eruv. Since when does Shmuel say that by physically dividing up your eruv, it's not a valid eruv? V'ha Omar Shmuel bayish shemenichen bo eruv eno tzarach litein es hapas. That we know that there's a halacha. Let's say there are 5 guys in a chutzner and they want to make an eruv. So 4 of them bring over their matzah to Yankel's house. So if they do that, then Yankel does not have to put his matzah in the same container. My taima, lav mishum da'amar dekeven demanach besala kaman demanach hachadami. Hachanami keven demanach besala kaman demanach hachadami. What's the reason? Isn't it because we say that even though Yankel is keeping his own matzah in his own cupboard, it's as if it's, or his own basket, it's as if it's with us now. So too, why don't we say the same thing? Even if you split up the matzahs, it's as if they're all in the same basket. So the Gemara says no. Amar lehasam afal pi she'ein pas. My time at the kulu hachadairi. He says no. There, what Shmuel was saying is that Yankel doesn't even have to contribute a matzah at all. It's not that his matzah is somewhere else in the house. The whole concept of an eruv is for us to have some kind of shared ownership or shared residence, and as a result, if all my friends come to my house and they put their food down here, so they've shown that we reside together as one happy collective. I don't have to contribute a matzah to show that I reside here because I live here, right? I actually do reside here. And that's why I don't have to contribute the matzah. You understand? So it's a totally different concept. That's why Yankel doesn't have to contribute the matzah, because he's already demonstrated residence, because it's his house. Right.
Before many Davim before that.
Yeah, probably.
No, that he'd have to contribute. In other words, he can carry in his own house, but other people can carry in his house.
No, I don't think
There was
so.
some kind of no parallel to this. Okay.
I have a vague recollection of what you're talking about, but I think it's a different case. Amar Shmuel, Erev Mishum Kinyan. So Shmuel says another statement. He says that the whole principle of Eruv is that when the guys come over to my house and they all give matzahs and we put it in a box together, they're actually acquiring a portion of my residence by giving me a matzah. In other words, the matzah that they present to me is sort of a method of purchase. They're buying into my residence and becoming co-tenants by putting down some of the rent. Okay, it's basically what they're doing when they give me the matzah.
It's not his. It's not considered his. The Kenyans normally give something over to the other person. But
right.
This isn't given to him.
Right. So he's saying, so that's what Shmuel is saying. Is saying that really what's happening is that we're creating a corporate entity that is based upon us all residing in the same place together, and the way that it works is that they're basically purchasing a portion of the residence where the matzah is residing.
You purchase something, you give something to the other person.
Yeah, so they're giving.
You give up this still belongs to everybody. It's not all his.
Right. It's still he's acquiring a chelik in that matzah. Yankel acquires a chelik in that matzah, and we all acquire a chelik in the matzah. But it's basically a process of kinyan.
He's acquiring a chelik because he never contributed any food in there, so you did get something from it.
So
but he doesn't have to.
Tenants or owners is equal in the eyes of halacha for these purposes. V'im tomar mipnei ma ein konen b'ma. So then you may ask the question, well, if it's an issue of kinyan, then why can't they use a coin? Why do they have to use a food item? The answer is mipnei she'ena mitsuya ba'arvei shabbosos. So the answer is because the rabbis were concerned that not everyone has coins in their pocket Erev Shabbos. You spent all your money going to Sobeys before Shabbos, right? You know, this is before the age of credit cards, yeah? So you already spent all your whole paycheck on buying kosher food for Shabbos. So therefore they said it's enough if you give up food.
So you leave an object, you leave your watch.
So the Gemara says, so 1 second. So Heicha de'irav mihu likni. So the Gemara says, well, okay, if it's just an accommodation, so then I would assume that you're still allowed to use a coin. It's just that you're not obligated to use a coin. So the Gemara says, no. Gzeira shema yomru ma'a ikar v'zimnin delo shchiach ma'a v'lo asi li'aru v'bepas da'asi erev li'ikal kulei. So the rabbi said, no. We only allow you to use food. We don't allow you to use anything else, including money. And the reason is because if we were to allow you to use coins, then people would start to primarily use coins, perhaps. People would then make the mistake to think that you can only use coins because, after all, that's what a kinyan normally requires. And then one Shabbos will come along where a guy says, "Oi, I don't have any coins left," and they'll neglect to make an eruv, and then the whole principle of eruv will be forgotten, and people will have a distorted outcome of, a distorted perception of what works and what doesn't work with an eruv. It's not necessary to eat it. It has to be available to eat. But the point is that they made an across-the-board requirement that you always have to use food so that people don't end up in this predicament in the future.
And then you'd have a certain share of food?
Well, yeah, there has to be a kazayas for every person.
It has to be available to eat. You can't have coins for eating, so you really need food in order to have that available.
No, the Gemara says that the issue here is kinyan. The issue here is that it's a purchase according to Shmuel.
Not like air food.
Which one of the people in the chutzner doesn't want to participate in this course?
Right. So we've talked about that. This is an old issue that you're raising. If a person doesn't want to participate, then he puzzles everyone else. Yeah, absolutely. Rabba Omar, we have to go weiter. Rabba Omar erev mishum dira. So Rabba now says that no, it's not an issue of purchase, of acquisition. It's an issue of residence. And the issue is as follows. When you leave food in a certain domicile, then by definition, you're staking a claim of residence. I leave my food where I reside. So by leaving a matzah in Yankel's house, I'm demonstrating residence. It's not that I'm acquiring tenancy in his house, but I'm demonstrating residence.
Like a guest almost.
Yeah, I could be a guest, but the point is that since we all reside together in the same house, that's what creates the corporate entity. The Chatzer, a partner, the Chatzer is now servicing primarily that one house where we all are partners in residence, and as a result, the Chatzer now becomes a service area for that one incorporated entity of Yankel's house. All the other houses are sort of like bottle to Yankel's house. Now, my Beinayu, so the question is, what's the difference between them? If we already established that whether you hold that it's kinyan or dira, you always have to use food, so now the question is, what's the difference between the two? Ika Beinayu kli, upachos mishava pruta, v'katan. The nafkamina will be, by the way, I made a mistake. It's not that everyone, according to Rashi, you have to leave more than just the kazayas. You have to leave enough for shtei seudas. You have to leave enough for 2 meals in that matzah. So the nafkamina will be as follows. Number one, do you need to use a kli? Do you need to make a kinyan chalipin? If you wanted to make a kinyan of exchange without exchanging, without let's say using the food itself as the method of kinyan, could you use a kli? Could you use a handkerchief to create the kinyan? According to the second opinion, no. You have to. It's the food itself that demonstrates residency, and the kinyan is irrelevant. And the second nafkamina is going to be: could you use pachos mishava pruta? Could you use food that is enough for 2 meals, but is worth less than a shava pruta because it's like junk food or whatever it is? And then the third nafkamina, according to the first opinion, it has to be shava pruta in order for the kinyan to work. And according to the second opinion, it does not have to be shava pruta. And the final nafkamina will be katan. Can I have a katan go ahead and take my matzah over to Yankel's house? If the issue is that you need to affect the kinyan, a katan is not able to affect the kinyan. But if the issue is demonstrating residence, you can use a katan to demonstrate residence for you. Amar le Abaye le Rabba lididach kasha v'lishmuel kasha. So Abaye says to Rabba, both according to you and Shmuel, both according to both opinions, whether you say that it's dira or whether you say that it's kinyan, according to both opinions, it's difficult. Ha Tanya, because we have the following brisa. Chamisha shagavu es Eruven kishehem olichan es Eruven l'makam acher echad ma'olich l'kulan. So the brisa says as follows. Let's say you have 5 guys in Chatzer A, and these 5 guys make an Eruv. And then they say, you know what, let's make an Eruv with the guys in Chatzer B so that we can carry into the shared Mavun. So they send Yankel, and they say, Yankel, you go over on our behalf and bring over a piece of food on behalf of all of us, and you go ahead and make an Eruv with the guys in Chatzer B. So the Gemara says, Hu nihu de kakani v'sulo, hu nihu de kadayer v'sulo. So the question is, what right does only one person from Chatzer A have to go on behalf of all the guys in Chatzer A? Is he the only one that's making the kinyan? What about all the other guys who have to make a kinyan? And furthermore, if it's a demonstration of residence, don't all of the guys in Chatzer A have to demonstrate residence? Why is it sufficient if only one of them demonstrates residence? So the Gemara answers, Amar le, lo l'didi kasha v'lo l'shmuel kasha. So Rabbi says, it's not a question on me, it's not a question on Shmuel. Because why? Shlichus tekulu ka'avid. Because they send Yankel as their shaliach. And a shaliach can go ahead and make a kinyan on behalf of all of the other guys, and a shaliach can go ahead and demonstrate residence on behalf of the other guys, so it's not a problem.
Did he take it from the collective food?
It would seem that he takes it from the collective, yeah.
Why wouldn't he have to take all the food?
Maybe jointly owned by all.
Maybe he does have to take all the food. I'm not sure. Let's take a look at Rashi. Bishvil kulan vafilo nasan hu levado pas. No, echas bishvilan. No. He only has to take one. He only has to take one. He only has to take one loaf of bread for all of them. Since he's already made an eruv with them, then he's acting as a member of the incorporated entity, and he can act as their shaliach. So Amar Rabba, Amar Rab Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav Halacha Kareb Shimon. The final psak of the Gemara is that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. And the fact that the Gemara does not say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon as interpreted by Shmuel, Rashi deduces from this language that the halacha is like Rav Shimon as we had originally understood it, which was not only can the people of the two outer chutzers carry their objects into the inner chutzer, but even the members of the inner chutzer can carry their objects to the each outer chutzer as well. And that's the final psak. We go on to the next mission. Fascinating next case. Misha ba baderech. A person is traveling and he's on his way home on Friday. Rabbi Black, did this ever happen to you? You're coming back from a conference or a meeting, and it's Friday, and you miscalculated, and you're outside the tchum, or there's a snowstorm, and the weather's bad, and you don't think you're going to make it for Shabbos. It has, really?
Many times.
So
Busloads.
Busloads. So what are you going to do?
Stuck in the bus.
You get stuck on the bus. And this is, by the way, this is before people have cars. So a guy's walking home. He's walking home from his journey, or he's on a camel or a donkey, and he's on his way home, and he realizes he ain't going to make it back for Shabbos. And not only is he not going to make it back, but he's not even going to be within the tchum of his house for Shabbos. See, if he's within the tchum of his house, so Mele, he can walk the extra 2,000 amas to get home. But he's not even within the 2,000 amas. So what is he supposed to do? V'hayamakir ilono goder. So here's a special solution that the rabbis gave to a person who's in this predicament. If a guy recognizes a particular tree or fence, and he says, V'amar shvisasi tachtav, he says, you know what? I don't want to be kona shvisa here where I'm standing. I want to be kona shvisa underneath that tree that's within 2,000 amas of where I'm currently standing.
You have to be able to see it?
No, you don't have to see. You just have to know that it's there. That'll be my center point, and that'll create my radius of 2,000 amas from that place, not from here. And his home is within 2,000 amas of that tree. It's within 2,000 amas of him, and it's within 2,000 amas of his home. So therefore, that would normally work, but in this case, as we'll see why, lo amar klum, his words are ineffective. However, if he says shvisasi bi'ikaro, mahalech mimakom ragla ve'ad ikaro alpayim ama, or me'ikaro ve'ad beso alpayim ama. Then, however, if he specifies more, instead of just saying underneath the tree, which is too nondescript, too generic, but if he says I want to acquire residence at the trunk of the tree, at the base of the trunk, so then, because he was very specific in identifying the exact place where he wants to be Kona Shvisa, so as long as it's within 2,000 amos where he's currently standing, that becomes his midpoint for his place of Shvisa, and he can walk 2,000 amos to get to the trunk, and if the house is within 2,000 amos of there, he can walk 2,000 amos from the tree to back to his house. Nimsa mahalech mishachashech arbas alofim ama. So it turns out that he can walk up to 4,000 amas using this einfal, using this special shtick. Now, imeno makir o she'eno baki ba'halacha va'amar shvisasi b'makomi zachalo makomo alpayim ama l'chol ruach. And it's agulo stiver Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos. If, however, he does not know about a specific tree or fence or any landmark, or if he just doesn't know the halacha, and he says, you know what, I guess I'll be Kona Shvisa right here where I'm standing. So the halacha is, and this is the standard halacha, that you have 2,000 amas of a radius in all directions, but that imaginary line of the 2,000 amma radius is a circle. That's what Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos says, which makes sense. 2,000 amas in every direction would comprise a circle. If we were to draw a line, that line would form a circle. Now, v'chachamim omer mirubaos ketavla mirubaas kidei she'ei niskar lezavuyos. And the chachamim disagree with Rabbi Chanina, and they say no. You have a square from that radius of 2,000 amas. Presumably, it's using the polar north, east, south, and west to create that square. And the way it works is that you create that imaginary circle with the radius of 2,000, and then you bound a square around it. And that's why I brought this CD in the case.
You're actually
okay.
So
the CD is the circle. You're here in the midpoint of the CD. Okay. You have 2,000 amas in all directions, and the Chachamim say you get to draw a square around it so that you benefit by getting this extra space of the corners. Now, use Pythagorean geometry, And you know
More than 2,000.
that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if you have a right angle triangle, which is like this, you have just imagine a right angle triangle, right? So you have 2,000 by 2,000. And then what is the hypotenuse? It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Go ahead. Go ahead, couple. In other words, so it comes out to be that if you want to know what the value of c is, what the hypotenuse is, it comes out to be 2,000 squared plus 2,000 squared. Take the square root of that sum, and that'll give you this. It's around 2,800. So instead of 2,000 amos, which is what would bring you to here, in the corners, you'd be able to go out to about 2,800 amos. So you get about approximately an extra 800 amos.
How do you make it? How can the corners you are more than 2,000 amos?
What?
When?
This is a special leniency that the Chachamim made. They square it instead of creating the circle.
That leniency only in this case, or?
No, it's in all cases when a person is kind of shvisa. Okay?
Rabbi, I'm forgetting the Daled Amos rule. When does that?
Daled Amos rule is when you're not Kona Shvisa because you were forcibly removed from the place where you were Kona Shvisa at the inception of Shabbos.
Why does he have to make a declaration when we learned before, even when he's sleeping?
Well, you have to at least know when you're sleeping. That's the machlokas.
Oh, so that would be machlokas. So there's no machlokas.
So, Kappel, what did you get?
I don't have a square root function, I don't think, but it's the square root of 8 million.
Right, of 8.
It's not a smart enough phone.
The person's smart, the phone not so.
Square root of a squared plus b squared.
Okay.
What did he get? He got a headache.
Got a headache.
Okay, all right.
You have to call someone and ask.
All right, let's get Texas Instrument over here.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, v'zohi sha'amru ha'ani ma'ariv beragla. And so this is an example of where the rabbi said, where a guy's traveling and he doesn't have food with him, that if you're a poor person, you can make an eruv with your feet. Remember, you don't need to have food in order to make an eruv. You can make an eruv with your feet because wherever you are, you're kind of shvisa. Amar Reb Meir anu ein lanu ela ani, and Reb Meir says the 2,800. 28. Okay.
The rabbi has a better phone.
The only
Why don't you just multiply 28 to make it work?
the only time. So Reb Meir says the only time that you're allowed to use your feet to be kona shvisa without food is if you're poor or in a situation like this where there's an emergency, you don't have food available. And Reb Yehuda Omer, no, I disagree. Echad ani ve'echad ashir lo amru me'arbin v'pas and lahakel al ha'ashir shelo yatsa v'ya'ariv b'raglov. He says no. Even a wealthy person who has plenty of food is allowed to make an eruv with his feet as long as he goes out to the place where he wants to be kona shvisa bein hashmashos and he stands there. The whole issue of using food is an accommodation for a person who doesn't want to have to be burdened by having to stand in a place to be kona shvisa bein hashmashos. Then he can send himself, he put it out himself before Shabbos, or send his friend before Shabbos, put the food down, and the food will act as his representative to be kona shvisa. But it's not a chumrah, it's a kula, and therefore you can always be kona shvisa beraglov if that's what you'd like to do. So now the Gemara asks the question, Milo Omar Klum. Why is it that in the first case of the Mishnah where you said, I want to be kona shvisa underneath that tree, your words do not work? So Amar Rav, Lo Omar Klum Kol Iker, Da'afilu L'tachtav Shal Ilan Lo Matzi Azil. So Rav says it means that no, it doesn't work at all. You're not kona shvisa underneath the tree, even though that was your intention, because you were sufficiently nondescript, non-specific, and as a result of not wanting to be kona shvisa where you're standing, you also lose out where you're standing too, and you're stuck with Dalet Amos. I think where's the Rashi? Lo Amar Klum Kol Iker v'lo Yoziz Mimakomo. You can't move at all. You're stuck for the rest of Shabbos according to Rav. And Ushmul Amar Lo Amar Klum Lebeso Avo Letachtav Shel Ilan Matzi Azel V'Nase Tachtav Shel Ilan Chamer Gamel. So Shmuel disagrees. He says no. The fact that you designated that you want to be kona shvisa in this vague area of underneath the tree. Now the tree, why is the tree vague? Because a tree could be huge. It could be a sequoia, and it could spread out for horizontally for 30 amos. It could be very, very broad. And because you didn't specify, Shmuel says, somewhere underneath that tree, you're kona shvisa, but you have to go l'chumra. Which means that, so let's say, we'll assume for a moment, I'm learning according to the first pshat in Rashi, we'll assume for a moment that the farthest point away from you of that tree is still within your 2,000 amos. But the problem is that even though you can get to the farthest point of the tree away from you, when it comes to going further to get to your house is only within 2,000 amos of one point of the tree. But the farther away point from the tree, from the house, is beyond 2,000 amos. And therefore Shmuel says that in that scenario, you can get to the tree, but we're not going to let you go to the house, because basically your 2,000 amos is limited l'chumra, subtracting the entire area of the tree. So if the tree is, let's say, 30 amos wide, you have to subtract 30 from 2,000 in any direction, l'chumra, and your house is, so therefore you won't make it back to the house. So he says, therefore, it's called Chamar Gamel, which basically means we give you the chumras of all directions. Ba limdod min hatzafon, and therefore, if you need to get to the north, let's say I'm coming from the south, and my house is further north than the tree, so then we say no. We're going to be moded in lo min hador. We're going to measure the 2,000 amos northward from the southernmost point of the tree. And ba limdod min hador, moded lo min hatzafon. And if you're coming from the north, you want to go south, your house is to the south. So then we measure from the northernmost point of the tree 2,000 amos to go to the south. And if it turns out that the house is beyond that southernmost point or northernmost point of the tree, then you won't be able to make it home.
Pick a small tree.
What?
Pick a small tree.
Pick a small tree, and then you won't have, or pick the trunk of the tree. You won't have a problem. Have a wonderful Shabbos.